Hello everyone, it's the 21st of December today and we are very close to Christmas 2021. So I thought I would do an original tag. Tags are such a fun way to interact on BookTube and to find out about new books, new titles that somehow we wouldn't really find out otherwise. And also to understand a little bit more about your reading taste, your reading history. So as I was talking with some friends about a recent event, let's say in the entertainment world, which is the docu-series or documentaries in a series called Get Back about the Beatles, produced, I think, and directed by Peter Jackson. I thought I would create a tag around this topic of the Beatles. I noticed that one tag called the Beatles tag had already been created in Spanish language on YouTube. So that's why I'm calling this tag the FAB4 tag, because they were known as the FAB4 as well. And I'm hoping that's going to be a fun one to go through. If you don't know about this docu-series called Get Back, it's, in summary, a documentary that's been produced using a lot of never published before footage of the Beatles, especially in their private sessions in their studio, creating music, playing together, for the most part messing around and hanging out and doing nothing, just exchanging comments, jokes, etc. And they thought that initially this footage was not possible to utilize because it was ruined, etc. But Peter Jackson and his team, they used some modern techniques to improve the audio, improve the quality of this film. And so out of a lot of hours, I don't know how many, probably close to 100 of footage they had, they narrowed it down to something like 8 hours. And so the documentary is a 3 parts documentary of the Beatles in the 60s. And I haven't seen it, but I've seen a lot of clips that are starting to be available on YouTube. And even just from the clips, I have to say that as somebody who loves the Beatles and loves their music, I fell in love again with them. I really feel like I fell in love again with their music, not only with the music, but their spirit, the band again, and so many really beautiful melodies and songs. So hopefully you're going to enjoy this one. Let's get to it. For each prompt, I have added a quote, mainly from Beatles quotes. And so I'm going to read that one as well. But if you do this tag in the future, don't feel compelled to read the quote again. The prompt will be more than sufficient as well, if you like. Here is number one. Number one, a quote by Paul McCartney. I just fell out of bed, found out what key I had dreamt it in, and I played it. He's talking about the song Yesterday. He had completely dreamt it in his mind, and he had just to wake up and write it on the piano. So the prompt is a book that you dreamed about or that inspired one of your dreams. When it comes to me, I think of a book called, a non-fiction book called The Case for Mars by Robert Zubrin, that I read around the beginning of the 90s, early 90s, I think around when it came out. And it was one of the first books where scientists who were astronomers and engineers were starting to put together serious and deep essays about how to to go about colonizing Mars. And it was fascinating. It's also a fun fact, the fact that Elon Musk, when he decided to invest in SpaceX and then develop SpaceX, Robert Zubrin was one of the major forces behind that, and his book, The Case of Mars, was part of that as well. So that's the book that inspired my dream. As for the dream, I think I was just simply reading this book, and one night, I still remember, I dreamt about being on Mars. I was standing there with my spacesuit, so I remember looking through the transparent glass of my spacesuit. And in the distance, there was a nice salmon-colored sky and these red rocks of Mars. And in the distance, in a kind of a valley, I could see a dragon that was flying around, like one of those Chinese festivals dragons. And then I waited a little bit and I realized that it wasn't a dragon, but it was 5 or 6 big horses who were running around and jumping and being happy, basically playing around with each other and lifting so much dust, Martian dust, that those puffs of dust were looking like the tail of the dragon. I will never forget that dream, and that's why this is prompt number 1. Prompt number 2, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, John Lennon. A book that talks about drugs or that was written under the influence of drugs. A book that I can think of immediately is Scar Tissue, which is the autobiography by Anthony Kiedis, the front singer of Red Hot Chili Peppers. He probably wrote most of it, if not a part of it. There is probably some ghostwriting there, but it's a very, very interesting book. It talks a lot about drugs, especially the experiences with drugs that Kiedis did when he was a little boy in Los Angeles are really fascinating, and it's a book that is informative, interesting to read for anybody, even if you don't particularly like or know the band Red Hot Chili Peppers. Prompt number 3, We Thought We'd Be Really Big in Liverpool, Ringo Starr. A book about someone who had far more success than what they expected, or a book that was much more successful than what the author expected. So I chose the second of these options, and I am quoting here, I'm using here the To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee, the famous classic. I found this brief quote by Harper Lee where she said, "I never expected any sort of success with Mockingbird. I didn't expect the book to sell in the first place. I was hoping for a quick and merciful death at the hands of reviewers. But at the same time, I sort of hoped that maybe someone would like it enough to give me encouragement." This is interesting, isn't it? I hoped for a little, as I said, but I got rather a whole lot. And in some ways, this was just about as frightening as the quick, merciful death that I expected for the book. Prompt number 4, John Lennon. Sitting on a cornflake, waiting for the van to come. I believe this is a part of lyrics from I Am the Walrus, I think. The song I Am the Walrus. A surreal book, or a book with some surreal elements that you enjoyed. I think Alice in Wonderland is not valid here because that's what John Lennon was thinking of when he wrote I Am the Walrus. The book that I am submitting here is a comic book. It's a graphic novel that is very quirky and unique. The title is Beta Testing the Apocalypse, and the author is Tom Kaczynski, whom I had the honor to actually meet in Los Angeles a few years ago. He is a very creative author. I will try and show maybe a couple of pages from Beta Testing the Apocalypse. The book is divided in a few short stories. They're very different from each other, but they are united by the same sense of philosophical reflection on reality that has always something a little bit quirky and funny about it. So it's not really the type of comic book you find it's not the type of content that you find in a comic book very often, really. That's what attracted me about this book, and I would recommend it to anyone, whether you like the genre of comic books or not. Prompt number 5, The White Album. A book you loved that either has a minimalist cover or that is written in a minimalist style. So I thought immediately when I thought about minimalist style to books like The Road, Cormac McCartney, but the prompt is asking me for a book you loved. And I didn't love The Road by Cormac McCartney, so that's not the right one. So I'm going to use this one. It's a very minimalist cover of a book published by the World on Fire Classics editions. and it's a Flannery O'Connor collection. Flannery O'Connor with a foreword by Bishop Robert Barron. I love this type of style, certainly minimalist from a design point of view, and it's part of this Word on Fire Institute classics that have been published by the Word on Fire. They are generally Christian religious classics, and but they all follow the same type of design. For example, in this series, I also have this 7-story mountain of the Word on Fire by Thomas Merton. Again, from an aesthetic point of view, they're really beautiful and pleasing. And this one by John Henry Newman, an essay on the development of Christian doctrine. I really love this, again, minimalist type of style. Prompt 6. Little darling, it's been a long, cold, lonely winter. Here Comes the Sun, George Harrison. Maybe you didn't know that Here Comes the Sun was written by George Harrison. A book of poetry that you found uplifting. Book that I found uplifting of poetry is a book by Giosuè Carducci, very famous Italian poet of the last decades before 1900. He was very, very famous in Italy, still is very famous in Italy. He's been taught in Italian schools. His main book of poems, you can find it translated in English. I'm going to include the link in the description with a specific title that now I don't remember. But if you want to see what kind of poetry he was writing. Carducci is seen as a poet who brought back a little bit of classic aesthetics to the world of Italian literature and Italian poetry. So almost like a new classicism in his role in Italian literature. A lot of poems that talk about nature, that talk about the life in the countryside, just a lot of beauty, a lot of beauty. And I strongly suggest his poetry, even if you don't speak Italian and you get to read the English translations, I'm sure they are very beautiful as well. Prompt number 7, A Day in the Life. An experimental book that's very uncommon for its content or format, and yet it works well. I'm thinking of a very unique book that's being produced and created by the famous director J.J. Abrams. The book is called S with a dot, and it's really interesting. If in case you haven't heard about it, it's of course a little gimmicky, but I loved it when as soon as I heard the concept. You get into the box of the book, a book that looks in every respect like a book that you got from the library, including a fake library little sticker and all that. Inside the book, you have a story that is an original, let's call it fantasy story, and a lot of marginalia and margin comments. Not only that, but also a lot of objects like a little piece of tissue, a letter, a postcard, and you realize very quickly that this book has been used in a library in the fiction that's been created by J.J. Abrams as a tool for two people to communicate with each other. One of them would write a little comment on the book in the margins and then leave the book there. The other person would come to the library, pick up the book, read the comment, and answer with another comment in the margins. And so this game would go on, and you clearly can see the difference in their writing, in their handwriting. I think also because it's in different colors, which makes it a little bit easier to understand who is writing what. So you have this meta creation. You have the real book, then you have the communication between these two people, and the communication between the two people has a lot to do with the story that is told within the book, and it becomes a mystery and also a love story, a potential mysterious love story between these two people. It's really full of love for story, love for creativity, a feast that you can spend a lot of time in and even go back after you've finished it because it's not about the story. It's really about the enjoying the journey, all the different props. It's almost like being part of a movie in a sense. Only somebody like J.J. Abrams could have thought about something like that. I find it really wonderful. Prompt number 8. This is not a quote from the Beatles, but a quote from an article I found. Over half of Americans today in 2021 who are 45 years and older attribute the Beatles split to Yoko Ono. So the prompt is a book about a woman, or if you can think of one, a man, who is unjustly blamed or accused of something. And the book I'm thinking of is The Cloven Viscount by Italo Calvino, which is one of the books by Calvino who are part of a series, even if they are separate and self-standing stories. The Cloven Viscount is hilarious because it's the story of this knight who gets hit by a bomb during a war, and he gets split, completely split in the middle, but his two halves keep living. And after a while, we realize that one of these halves is all his good part, and the other half is all of his evil part. And how this story reminds me of a woman who is unjustly blamed or accused is because in the novel, the evil part of the Viscount is accusing the elderly nanny, Sebastiana is her name, to be a leper. And this particular accusation has then some consequences within the story. It's a lovely short, maybe I think it has novella length, that is part of a crucial part of Italian literature, as almost everything that Calvino wrote. So I recommend it. Prompt 9. This is lyrics written by John Lennon. Limitless, undying love, which shines around me like a million suns and calls me on and on across the universe. From Across the Universe, the song. The prompt is a book that opened your mind and made you think of the universe in a new way, either physically or spiritually. Physically, thinking about astronomy in a new way, or spiritually, because it had such a mind-expanding effect on you that your spirituality was opened up or changed or developed in some way. My book is by Carlo Rovelli, famous astrophysicist, Italian astrophysicist, and the title is Reality is Not What It Seems, The Journey to Quantum Gravity. I read this book maybe 3 or 4 years ago. Aside from talking about quantum gravity and a lot of topics that I'm sure I didn't quite completely understand, but I tried to, one of the things that stuck with me is the fact that Carlo Rovelli actually at a certain point talks about Dante. He talks about Canto 33 of Paradiso. See, I managed to talk about Dante in this video as well, because many scientists today think that in the explanation of the universe that Dante gives at the end of Canto 33 of Paradiso, there is, in a nutshell, an explanation that astrophysicists are getting at, or are getting to only today. The concept of the three-sphere as the structure of our universe. I'm not going to get into it here in this video because it's really complicated, but if you'd like to read about it, I'm going to link it below in the description and you can take a look. Really fascinating stuff. Number 10, Paul McCartney. Mother Mary comes to me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be. A book that you found very powerful and moving despite its apparent simplicity, like the song Let It Be. For this prompt, I'm going to say the book titled Maria, which is apt given Mother Mary. Lalla Romano is the author. She is Italian. And this book was written in the 1950s. I am afraid that it is not translated in English, but I am sure that some of Lalla Romano's books were actually translated in English. So I'll try to find them and copy them in the description. It's a book about Maria, who is the maid of an Italian family who live in between the city and the countryside in the Piemonte area, Torino, outside of Torino. It's really simple because the book does nothing much more than focusing around this character of the maid and how she goes about calmly and peacefully about her job, her work every day. Sometimes she goes back to her family who lived out in a village far away from the city in the countryside, and the difference between the Italian life in the countryside, in the villages, very rural, very farm-based, and certainly harsher, especially in the 50s, and the life in the city. I believe the author, Lala Romano, was thinking about her own maid in her own house when she wrote this, so there's a lot of kind of autobiographical elements in the book, which makes it beautiful, but it's also really, really lyrical. There is a lot of poetry in the book, and some portions, some paragraphs are almost like reading lyrics from a song. Since we're talking about the Beatles, I think that's a perfect one to conclude the list of 10 prompts. I'm hoping you enjoyed it, and I'm going to, I have already in mind some people to tag, so please check the descriptions, and if you like it, and for some reason you don't find your name in the tags, please go ahead and feel free to do it, because it's Christmas, and hopefully we all have a little bit more time to enjoy our tag videos and our interaction on BookTube. Thanks so much, and Happy Christmas, everybody.